nobody wants to really die. I think we just people lose hope. There's hope that will this ever get better? I don't want to do this anymore. How am I going to ask for help? I can't go to my department. I was a sergeant at the time. Who am I going to talk to? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my career? And so this, as I'm sitting there about to pull the trigger, just wishing that somehow something would happen to instill some hope.
Welcome to First Responder Fitness with Carl Wimmer, where armor is forged through mental, spiritual, and physical preparation. And good Monday. Welcome to First Responder Fitness, my friends. What a great day, a new opportunity, a new chance to pursue your goals, to just get laser focused on what it is you want to accomplish in your life, to get laser focused on your health, your fitness, your mental health, your spiritual health, making sure your family's taken care of, make sure that your job is taken care of, and making sure that your future looks bright, healthy, and prosperous. You may have noticed over the last few episodes the name change or a few different things that have taken place there. We have officially changed our name. We got great news in the last week or so, and our desire to use First Responder Fitness rather than Frontline Fitness became a reality. And so although we launched under the Frontline Fitness banner, we are First Responder Fitness now, and that is super exciting to me because it more fully encapsulates who we are and what we do. Our focus is on the men and women in law enforcement, the men and women in the fire service. That is our focus. That is who we want to serve. That is who we are bringing the best information in the world to change your lives, to change your health, and to change your careers. Now, of course, this information is for everybody and would benefit everybody, but our focus, of course, is in the first responder. We have an amazing episode for you today. Today, I am bringing on a longtime friend who I have not seen in some time, who has an amazing story. Not only does he have firefighter roots, but he has law enforcement roots, as well as currently serving as a mental health professional, specifically helping those in the first responder community, dealing with trauma, dealing with the stress of the job. I'm super excited to have him on to talk about an issue that is so important, that the mental health of our first responders. As I've mentioned before, mental health affects us all. And if we can't get through the mental aspect of this job, the mental aspect of the tough things that we see as police officers and as firefighters, we won't make it to retirement. Well, we want to make it to retirement. We want to make it there and years, decades beyond. And so we're going to be bringing Josh Watcott on today to talk about mental health, talk about your mental health and surviving this career. Super excited for it. And so sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy this interview as much as we enjoy bringing it to you here at First Responder Fitness. We are super excited to be joined by Josh Watcott, as I said in the introduction. So just honored to have him with us. Longtime friend. We used to work together. We served together on the police force. But I just want to do a brief introduction, and then we're going to just have a conversation here. Josh, as I mentioned in the introduction, Josh comes from a varied background. He is his father's retired fire chief, and who also served as a police officer for some time before he became a full-time firefighter. Josh has 22 years as a police officer before he retired in December of 2020, the same year I retired, and the same month, in fact. He worked just about every possible assignment you could think of for law enforcement. He was a detective. He worked in juvenile crime. He worked on the SWAT team. In fact, I think we served on the SWAT team for a short period of time together, Josh. Field training officer, peer support coordinator, fantastic. That's right up the alley we're going to talk about today. He was a motorcycle officer, in fact, one of the first motorcycle officers for his police department, and he worked in narcotics. He retired, like I said, to address his mental health and wellness, and during his treatment, Josh realized he could still support first responders in a different capacity, and that is therapeutically. He went to the University of Phoenix, received his Bachelor of Arts in Human Services and Management, and continued his schooling at Arizona State University, where he received a master's in social work. And so Josh now uses evidence-based therapy while incorporating positive psychological principles and practices to help his clients. I suppose, Josh, that you work both with first responder community and just generalized civilians. Is that right?
Yeah, so I work for a company. We're an EAP provider. Obviously, employee assistance programs provide a lot of different services to companies that contract with us, and whether it be training, whether it be therapy, there's a lot of different services we do. But obviously, therapy being one of the bigger services that we provide to organizations. So yeah, I work with young youth. I work with adults. I work with, prominently my caseload's about 75% of first responders, and then the normal public. But and I think you get that. It's mainly just because of the connection that you have with that population of people once you've been in that capacity for a while.
Absolutely. The first question that comes immediately to mind is, is there a significant difference, or do you see a difference in perhaps why first responders come to you versus the general public, the unique aspects of treating first responders? I had mentioned at one point, and we'll get into this a little later, but I had mentioned in a previous podcast that we in the first responder community, we're supposed to be badass. We're supposed to have everything together, and unfortunately, the stigma of mental health, which I think is getting better, but the stigma of mental health is that if you admit you need help, you have a weakness. And so I've always wondered how that plays in to how you help this community, the differences between that community and kind of the civilian community.
Well, a couple things I think play into that. One, this House bill that was passed last year before that, that's requiring these mental health check-ins from agencies that were wanting to get government funding to build peer support programs or use it for other purposes, require them to be participating in regular check-ins at least once a year. And so I think it comes down to two things. I'm grateful that the House bill came to be, because it is reducing some stigma. Like you said, we're badasses. It's a difficult thing. And I still get people coming in here that dragging their feet. I'm not saying anything. I don't want this going back to my administration. Well, the only thing they want is that you showed up. And that's when it comes from the leadership side of things, where I can really see agencies that have leaders, from your deputy chief to your lieutenants, whatever the case may be, that support mental wellness. And I have chiefs coming in here that say, yep, I don't care. I don't want to know anything. I just want them to be able to have a safe place to come into, somebody that gets it, that understands it. And that's what's busting down the stigma of mental health associated with first responders. We got some ways to go, but we're making some headway. I probably see 10, 15 wellness checks a week, from clear down south, clear into Pocatello, Idaho, all kinds of things. And I'll bet you I get one or two of those back out of the week to continue to do regular therapy that would have never seeked services before if they were not mandated to come in and just do a wellness check. How are you doing? Here's some principles. Here's some coping strategies. Because, like you said, the dynamics of police work or firework, there's so many variables that create so much, from family dynamics to the anxieties to that limbic system that stays activated to constantly being concerned about their whereabouts and it goes on and on and on. So being able to make that connection, I think, and have that relationship of trust on my side, luckily, of having some experience as a cop, I think builds, tends to bridge that gap that they want to come in and they want to get help. And then what do? I always say, go back and tell your friends, tell your partners that this was not a shitty experience, that you're getting help. You're a human being, and there's things that we have to do for ourselves. And coming in to talk to a therapist is not that bad. And that's what's also helping change the culture is guys are talking about it more often now. They're talking about, yes, I see a therapist regularly. Yes, I go in and talk to somebody. You do? Well, tell me about it. What's positive about it? And it's making an impact. It really is.
Oh, that is absolutely fantastic to hear. That I will never, and I've seen, obviously you see it firsthand, but I've seen the change throughout my career. When I first started in law enforcement in, let's say 1996, 1997, I don't know if there was any agencies that required that you go, that they mandated mental health or health check-ins, anything like that. And so they would offer it. I will never forget. And in fact, a mutual friend of ours who served on SWAT with us and served in the police department with us a long time ago, Justin Larson, I was speaking to him not long ago, and we were talking about the same situation. I was a young officer, and it was my first really, really rough child suicide that I had went to. It was right before Christmas, and the devastation of that family and dealing with that entire dynamic, the little sisters of the boy who took his own life, the mother, the father, everything. That, to this day, I remember every aspect of that. I remember the young man's name. And when the weather changes outside, I can still feel some of those feelings. And Justin was saying how much that still affects him to this day. And I'll never forget that we were pulled into the office, a couple of us that were first on scene there, and said, "Hey, you guys okay? You need to talk to anybody." And you got to be a stronger person mentally than I was to admit that you needed to talk to somebody. Like, no, we're fine. But now here, 25 years later, we're still talking about that situation. I've seen it change as well, where now that they're mandating it, there's good things coming out of this. There's good things that people are forced to come, but like you said, they're receiving the benefit. And now you say they're openly discussing it with their fellow officers. That's fantastic. You mentioned something, and I want to go into that, where you talked about the limbic system and how it's always firing when you're in a first responder type situation. I talk about that because I find that fascinating. It's something I'm super interested in. It's something that I have talked about, but I want to hear it from a professional's point of view.
Well, I probably don't have anything extra to talk to you about, but we look at the job itself. I mean, there's always a threat response. There's always a fear response. You walk around gloating that you're a cop. You're wearing this uniform. You're always analyzing threats, whether it's somebody sitting on the street corner, whether it's walking into a business, whether it's at lunch. There's always this heightened awareness, right? And we have to have it for this job. It's that gut instinct. It's that moment of, yes, I need to run. I need to get the hell out of here. Or, yep, we're going in. We have to have it, and it saves lives. And if we didn't have it, We wouldn't be able to be on guard. We wouldn't be able to have that gut instinct that protects us from certain events. However, what does that entail at home, or what does that look like for cops and firefighters? Well,
Exactly.
at home, and after living in this thing for 10 hours or 12 hours a day, and you got to consider that if I had a whiteboard here with me, I could show you that the average person, the average citizen, right, where they will really peak that like limbic system, like I finally got a 4-wheel drive truck and I can drive down the freeway at 100 miles an hour with my big tires and it's snowing and I'll be just fine. Holy shit, I'm losing control of my car and now I almost hit the barrier. Right, that would probably peak somebody up to where we get into that hypervigilant zone. Your heart rate goes up to about 105, 110 beats per minute, and you push into taking action, which is you're going to run, you're going to stay in the fight, or you're going to freeze up and do nothing. Right? The average citizen goes through maybe 3 or 5 of those types of responses in a lifetime. And what does a cop and a firefighter do? You're in and out of that, in and out of that, in and out of that, in and out of that 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 times a day. So then to transfer that home, then what happens? Now we're angry. There's irritability. We're tired of making decisions. It's exhausting. I'm going to sit here on the lazy boy recliner because this feels much better. Start losing connection with our families. We self-soothe through piss poor things like booze, alcohol. And I mean, even quite frankly, the gym can be a problem at times, right? Because you have these addictive behaviors that we just do to self-soothe and get out of it. And if we don't really keep a good work-life balance in a lot of things we do, it can be problematic. So trying to teach officers of managing that hypervigilance and those symptoms or those manifestations that come from that, and then having good, healthy coping strategies so that you can be a productive dad or mom. You can be a good friend. You can still have good socialization with others. That's the key. You don't have to isolate yourself. You're a human being, and yes, you do a hard job, and yes, you can still have a healthy life. Because I think even the last statistic that I was looking at, and I can't remember where I pulled it from, that the average cop and firefighter that does 22 years or 20 years of service, we're dying by the age of 63 and a half.
Yeah. So the latest data shows that the average police officer lives 22 years less, a life of 22 years less than the average citizen.
And it's everything we're just talking about. What's killing us? It's heart attacks and strokes and all these other things. Because the other thing that happens when you're in this zone is your body's just pumping out that cortisol. And a lot of times of cortisol isn't healthy. And then what does it do? It just stores into fat. And if we're not doing anything to help with that, then you're in trouble.
Absolutely. That is so good. So good. Especially as you're talking about coming home and sitting on the lazy boy, because when you're amped up, when you're in a state of hypervigilance all the time at work, where there's that equal opposite reaction when you get home. And if I'm not incorrect here, your body goes into more of a depressed state where you've been so stimulated at work. You now come home and you're in a depressed state. And so your family really gets the crap. They get what's left over. They get the garbage that just kind of oozes out of you, whatever you have left. And your family faces the ramifications of that. I want to talk about overall wellness strategies to reduce anxiety, depression, and things like that. So take it from there. What can we do? What are some strategies that can be implemented?
Well, I think one thing that you can look at yourself about, right, is what do we know about nutrition? And how do cops eat? How do firemen eat? Like shit most of the time. It's quick, in and out. We're skipping meals. We're not preparing meals. We're not eating high protein meals. It's garbage food, right? And you know more about nutrition than I do, but what we know about nutrition too is not only for our bodies, but how we cognitively are able to process events, hardships, stressors, traumas, has a ton to do with what we put in our bodies. Tons. And so I always tell guys, if you're eating like shit, the result's going to be shitty.
Amen. Garbage in, garbage out. Absolutely.
So that helps us stay present, right? The other thing too is, what do they talk about? I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Gil Martin. I'm sure you've heard of that guy before.
We are going to work on getting him on the show. Absolutely. Yes.
He's an amazing human, right? And he talks about, ideally 43 minutes of exercise is extremely helpful to reduce symptoms of anxiety, depression, getting that limbic system. I mean, stress hormones, the reduction of that is all through exercise. And even if people walk, but he says, when he was doing some research, that if you can just move 5 or 6 days a week for 23 minutes a day, that's helpful to get your body out of that limbic system, keep it from being so activated, and just push that somewhere else and keep yourself active. But then it's also helping with the weight issues and the cortisol dump and those other things that we get. Then, Carl, one of the biggest things that I would say that helped me, that I feel like I did a pretty good job with. I mean, sure, I had my challenges. I didn't eat the best. I got overweight. My back hurt. There was all kinds of things to it, right? And it wasn't really until later, after I retired, that I said, good Lord, I have got to do something with myself. I'm short as shit and weighing 250 pounds. This isn't good, right? And so I started doing some of these things that if I'm going to teach wellness, I probably better get on board with it. But the one thing that I felt like I did really good through my years of service, which was helpful for me, is socialization. And what I mean by that is I was able to keep a good balance of friendships. I didn't just hang around cops. I didn't want to just go to the watering hole and hear all this negative shit about the department and hear how everybody's, be cynical and jaded, that the world, the people, blah, 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 blah. You know how it goes when you get coffee talking, it gets ugly. And there's no positivity usually involved in it at all. So I had good friendships that had nothing to do with being cops. They were business people. They were other people in society that didn't see the world quite as jaded as I did, which kind of helped me see a different perspective, that not everybody has warrants. Not everybody's a drug addict. There are good people. There are good people in society, right?
Yeah, but so yes, there are.
I feel that was really helpful for me to keep a balance of good friendships, not fall into that so cynical, jaded, that makes us such negative people, or has the propensity to make us negative people. And then, the fourth one that I really talk about wellness, that I think is so important, is sleep. Because sleep exacerbates every physical and mental health problem we have. And sleep is so big. And I thought that cops were bad when it comes to sleep. But until I started doing more research around some of these firefighters that work this 48-96 shift, and they're up and down, and those tones blow off, and then the lights come on, and it's 3 a.m, and then your heart jumps right out of the gate, and it is brutal on the body. Brutal, which is probably why your 22 years off people's life is very accurate when you're in this job, police or fire.
Absolutely. My son just graduated the fire academy. I directed him that way rather than in law enforcement for a whole host of reasons. You would understand, but yeah. I mean, it is a rough thing, and it's so funny because people who are listeners to this podcast, they're going to think that you and I coordinated all of this information beforehand, which we did not. You're just reaffirming so much of what I've already been discussing, what we've been discussing here at First Responder Fitness, the importance of nutrition, the importance of sleep, and getting at least 2 sleep cycles if you can, because it's so critically important to your overall mental and physical well-being. You mentioned, and I am not going to push you at all, but just share whatever you're comfortable with. But you mentioned the things that you dealt with, the things that you had gone through. And I think our listeners would be very interested in just kind of, just as whatever you're comfortable with, your story of mental health and the fact that you decided to address your own mental health and wellness what that looked like, what led to that point, and now the fact that you are a former police officer, retired police officer, helping police officers and firefighters. So I think we'd love to hear that.
I mean, back in 2008, I was working in the schools and a bunch of, I've been involved in some other things that obviously I viewed as traumatic, right? Because trauma is different for everybody. What might be trauma to me might not be trauma to you, and vice versa. But there was some things that I felt that were traumatic, and I had been on a call for service where I'd been helping, and I guess this was probably the catalyst or the kicker for me. But I'd been on a working with a youth when I was at the school, and really got him to a better place. He was an at-risk youth dealing with a lot of drug use and abuse, and parents that were just kind of putting their heads in the sands. That's not my kid. That's not how he is. Blah blah blah. Well, eventually we get him into some treatment, get him some help, and he ends up. I get a call to the house that he's got a gun, and he ends up taking his own life. And so after this, very intimate relationship that I have with this gentleman and helping him get to a better place and things like that, that I think was the kicker. Like getting into this negative, distorted thinking. Is this my fault? Should I have done something different? Could I have been a better cop? Could I have been a better mentor? Gosh, I must be horrible. And we go into this cycle that's so depleting. And then with all these other things, I had coming out of piss poor relationships, drinking, just coping strategies that weren't good, or not coping strategies, they're maladaptive coping strategies. They're terrible. And so I was doing a lot of these things, and then I decided, I decided to go out in my garage after I'd been drinking, put a gun to my head, and I had this badass little wiener dog. But nobody wants to really die. I think people lose hope. There's hope that, will this ever get better? I don't want to do this anymore. How am I going to ask for help? I can't go to my department. I was a sergeant at the time. Who am I going to talk to? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my career? And so as I'm sitting there about to pull the trigger, just wishing that somehow something would happen to instill some hope, this dog of mine comes blowing out of the garage, and she just came and sat next to me and just stared at me. And I said, "Oh my God, that's it. There's my hope. She needs me. My dog." And so at the time we were public safety. And so we had some firefighters that were lieutenants. And I figured if there's one person that gets, or maybe will be a little more understanding about mental health, it's probably a fireman. And so I approached him, called him, and I just said, "You know what? I need some help." And he said, "What's going on?" And I told him. And he said, "Well, you're not going to lose your job. You're not going to lose your badge. We want you to be successful. We want to help you." And that was a turning point. And so I got myself involved in therapy. And while I was trying to seek therapy, it was rather difficult I felt for me to find somebody that I could really connect with, that really could understand this culture, why we're behave the way we do, why do we do so many screwed up things. Like being able to share with somebody what I was experiencing was difficult. And going in to see a therapist that's now, crying. Now I'm having to console the therapist about an event. And so it took me a long time to find somebody, and I finally did, found a retired firefighter that really helped me work through some things. And then when I got done with that, as well as doing some substance abuse treatment, I said, it shouldn't be this damn hard to find a therapist that gets us, because we're not that weird. We're human beings, and we just do tough damn work. And because of all the things that we're exposed to and we see, sure, we might be a little strange at times.
Right.
I started going back to school to be a therapist after that. I said, that's what I'm going to do. It shouldn't be this hard. There should be some other people on the other side of this badge that get it, that understand it, and can be there for a resource and support these guys where they need support. And so that's what I did. It took me a long ass time, but I got there.
Wow. Wow. So, a whole other career, whole other, I mean, but still working in that same environment. That is, brother, brother, let me just tell you uh, that's a hell of a story. That is courageous, and what an amazing little wiener dog. I mean, having a canine background myself, working as a canine officer at one point, it just, I love dogs in the first place, but to have a dog that must have sensed, that something was going on, and come out to console you, to be with you, and just give you hope. That wherever you find that hope, that was important. What a And for you to finally reach out to somebody, I have friends. I'm sure you have friends. We all have friends in this line of work who have taken their own life. And God, if you could just say one thing to them, just, there is hope out there. You don't have to do this alone, and I'm glad you had the courage to reach out and get help, and look at the amount of people you're helping now. That's amazing. And, I didn't know, that's the first time I've heard that story from you. But I did see a change in you, several years ago, particularly on social media. And you had a saying that you would post, you would talk about, you would, there I am in uniform on duty, and I'm checking in, and there you are on social media saying it's okay not to be okay. And so I know that that's a popular saying, but when I hear that, I associate that with you. That when I hear someone say that, I automatically think about Josh Watcott, because that's where I kept hearing it, and you kept reaffirming that. Talk about that. I mean, it is okay to not be okay. You just don't want to stay there, right?
Yeah, it's okay. We all face hardships. We all face challenging things. I don't care what you do. We're human beings, and life is hard. And when you get into a profession, and first responder world, military, whatever the case may be, it even brings a whole load of other problems, and it's hard. And so there are going to be days where it doesn't feel good, and it doesn't feel okay. And it's in those moments that you've got to find that socialization piece. You've got to talk to a friend. You've got to find some hope. You've got to keep a balanced life, and reach out. I'm so glad I did.
Yeah. I'm glad you
I'm
did.
so glad I did. Like there, and you know what? There's many people that when I was feeling those way, and even now, I don't have a great day every day. I try to find one positive experience in my day, and I write about it, why it happened to me, why it was meaningful, and how do I get more of it. And I did that since I spent some time downtown and working with officers at the riots when we had all that going on in 2020. And I really try to just find one positive thing in my day, and focus on that, because it is okay not to be okay. And there's things that can change that. Maybe you don't need professional help. Maybe you just need a friend to talk to. Maybe you do need to reach out to a hotline number. It's okay. And you know what? Anymore these days, people, and I've worked with chiefs, I've talked with chiefs, I've seen people in my office as cops and firemen in crisis. When you have solid leadership, they don't want to get rid of you. That's not the goal. The goal is, yes, you do a hard job, you do hard things. They want you healthy, both physically, mentally. They want you back on the street, and most agencies will do whatever they have to do to help you get treatment. A lot of agencies budget for mental health now these days. And then, you've got these peer support groups and programs that are so helpful. There's confidential information there. It's privileged. People don't have to share things. But the more you just bottle it in, it's like a soda can, right? The more we bottle it in, you shake it up, it's going to explode at some point. And that's usually what we see in our first responders, is tons of anger, irritability, kick the dog, put a hole in the wall type thing, whatever. Because we're just shoving it down. And that doesn't work. It hasn't worked for the 22, 23 years me and you were in that thing. Jamming yourself in your patrol car alone for another 10 or 12 hours has not worked, and it hasn't worked.
That's right. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's people like you that are, and people that are open to talking about the hard things, that are open about talking about mental health, nutrition, I mean, physical health. That's what's saving people.
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying. That's really what we're trying to do, because the sad statistic, and I mentioned this, and I mentioned it somewhat in jest, but it's a serious thing. Is that uh, nationally, our law enforcement officers would probably, I mean, they would die less if we disarmed them and had them go around enforcing the laws like they do in England, because more officers are dying at their own hand with their own sidearm than are dying at the hands of a violent felon every single year in this country. And that's tragic when we are our top killer. I mean, that's just they're it's tragic. Of course, like I said, I do not support disarming police officers at all. I mean, I was a firearms guy, but but it does bring home the fact that there's still a serious mental health issue in this country with police officers and with firefighters. Believe it or not, the latest statistics out of to the year 2023, dating back over multiple decades, is more firefighters take their life every year than die in traumatic incidents, smoke inhalation fires, those types of things. Heart attack being the number one killer of both groups of people. But yeah, there is a mental health crisis in the first responder community. And I think, thankfully, it's been recognized and things are changing. So, predictable is preventable. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely right. Do you, what do you find is the most common? Is there a common or essential theme behind uh, the first responders that you see, that you talk with? Is there a common denominator that I don't know if there is, but is there a common theme that perhaps our viewers can say, okay, the something they should be looking for that would be like, okay, I need help? Is there a common denominator? Is there a common stressor, a common stress builder? I know there's not just one, but I don't even know if I'm asking the right question. I'm just trying to see, are the first responders, those on the front line, is there a common theme for the people that walk through your door, or is it all over the place, the issues they're dealing with?
I, I think it's sometimes all over the place, really. I think it's, sometimes it's family dynamics. I mean, divorce is such a common theme in the first responder culture because we lose disconnect. I see people, come in overwhelmed with stress. And why is that usually the case? Well, because they work too damn many hours. They work too much overtime. The job itself can be really, really addicting. It's an adrenaline seeking job. It's fun. However, if we don't keep it balanced, then yeah, you wonder why you're feeling depressed and you're isolated and you're losing relationships with your spouse because you're working 100 hours. That's a problem, So I see it as a number of different things. Obviously, anxiety, managing the limbic system, managing that hypervigilance, learning some coping strategies to manage anxieties a little bit better. Some depressive episodes for sure. But the most common theme, because I think cops and firemen and first responders in general, they're very resilient people. So I mean, I even see most of them, being able to process traumatic events anywhere between 3 days to 3 weeks. Like they're just very resilient people, and I think there's just something different in the mindset of first responders that they can process things a little bit better. I would.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The one thing we don't want is we don't want our first responders. How should I put this? We don't want our first responders relying on or waiting for the dog. waiting for the dog to, waiting for that moment. We don't want them to even get to that moment. So, there's stress in the job. There's stress in the job, period. There's nothing you can do about that. But is there a point where our friends, our brothers and sisters in uniform, are there signs that they should be looking for that say, okay, I don't want to go down this road any further. I need to get help before I'm sitting in my garage waiting for one last chance, waiting for one last, just anyone or anything that cares. We don't want to get to the crisis point. So when should somebody reach out? What are the signs and the symptoms, the things that they should be looking for, maybe even dealing with right now?
Well, I don't know if you've ever seen the mental health continuum before, but any time that we're exposed to any type of traumas or even high stressors, right? We what did they used to call it? The green, the green zone,
Green, yellow, orange,
red, right? So anytime that there's an experience that you feel there's trauma, there's high stress, right? We have manifestations that then begin to happen as our body tries to process information. And some of those manifestations, they look like negative thoughts. They look like more isolation. They look like aches and pains in your back. It looks like, sarcasm and cynicism and black humor, which sometimes is a good coping strategy for us, for sure. And, if you're doing a lot of the things that you mentioned over your podcast times, I'm sure, and there's a couple of things I've said about, staying healthy, nutrition, exercise, socialization, sleeping, and doing things that you like to do. Don't let them become used tos, as Dr. Gilmartin would say. We can move back here, but these are the things that you want to watch for. Is yes, when there's severe isolation, maybe even calling more sick into work than they probably should. Oh, maybe they're drinking too much, and now we're having to call into sick because we're drinking. Maybe there's illness, pain, extreme fatigue, anger and irritability that's just going on and on and on. Yeah, these are sure symptoms that, and I always tell everybody too, not just you don't have to be a person on peer support, for sure. For some things, confidentiality, privileged information, for sure, there's a lot of that. But damn well, you spend more time with these guys or women or whatever. You spend more time with your partner than they spend at home most often. You're talking 10 or 12 hours a day, right? And you're telling me when John shows up to work and you notice his boots aren't cleaned up and his badge is on backwards, or there's more mustard on his shirt than there probably should be, half the time we don't say anything. And we let people just sit there. As opposed to, gosh, this isn't you. Like, tell me what's going on. How can I support you? This isn't how you normally look. You're disheveled today, or you've been off for 3 or 4 days. What's happening for you? We don't do this. We just let people wallow in their own shit, and we don't say a word. You don't have to. We're all peer support. If you see these behaviors, if you see these things going on, and now it's 3 weeks, and this is still happening, because it can take 3 to 4 weeks for people to process, sometimes even longer than that. But if you're seeing people stuck, and we're still in yellow or orange and red over here, and you're still recognizing some of these behaviors in your peers or your spouse, it's probably time to say, hey, what's going on? How can I support you? And that's all you can do. You know as well as I do with suicide. If somebody's going to do it, they're going to complete suicide. But what can you do? Potentially by just asking, hey, I'm recognizing this with you. Tell me what's going on. Can instill enough hope for somebody to maybe make some change. We have to start looking for the signs, and we have to start having the guts to call out our peers when we see things.
Absolutely. And that's something that I feel very strongly about in this polite society. There is a time to be polite, but there's also a time to be assertive and step in. And you can polite somebody right to their own death if you don't say something. If you don't say, man, something's going on, let's talk. You think that, well, that's rude. I don't want to intervene. I don't want to be that person. No, you need to be that person. You need to be that person, because clearly no one is being that person for that person, for that person in crisis. And you're going to avoid, ignore, and polite that person right into their own death if you don't intervene. I absolutely agree with you that we just need people to step in and just say, what can I do? I'm here to listen. And, and I think that's it. I think that a lot of people don't know what to do, what to say. I'm going through a situation right now. We have, my listeners know this. We haven't even buried my nephew, who's working for the Department of Corrections, yet. His funeral is coming up in a few days, having taken his own life. And man, if I didn't see anything, no one in the family saw anything. But boy, what I wouldn't give if one of his workers recognized something and would have stepped in. And so many times we don't know, well, what can I do? Well, I'm not a trained professional. I guess just listen, right? Just be someone who cares.
Active listening and just showing some kindness and compassion towards others. Yeah. What's wrong with putting a hand on your shoulder? And you know what? Maybe people did ask, and those are the ones that scare me the most, right? We're not exhibiting symptoms, or maybe we are and people aren't calling them out on it, or whatever the case may be. And the only thing you can do is explore and ask a few questions and be the friend there and be there to support them when you can, and hope that maybe something that you do, maybe a small gesture of kindness or something, will tip people towards finding some hope. Yeah. But what a tough deal for you. What a tough deal.
Yeah. It's Suicide Awareness Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. Later this month, we'll be honoring mental health, specifically for first responders and law enforcement, and so it kind of all hit at the same time, and it's a rough situation for our family, and I don't want others to go through it, and I know you feel the same way. Our time is about coming to an end here. Is there a final message? Anything else we haven't talked about? A final message that you might be able to give that to our listeners, to our viewers?
I'll just say there are so many options for help and services, right? So if you are struggling and you do feel like nobody cares or nobody is listening, I do. And you can always call our number here at Blomquist Health. We always have a 24-hour on-call therapist will pick up the phone. If you're in crisis, I don't care if your company has the benefit or you don't. Call the number. There's this a lifeline for in the line of duty officers that I have here in my office. I've used it. You can text it. You can call it. It's confidential. I've tested it because I wasn't going to put it in my office if I didn't test it first. And so there's the 988 number. There are so many options to get some support. And I don't like saying help, because if you say help, I think, I don't know, some first responders are like, help, I don't need help. Support.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
We do a lot of things in training. We get support. We call for support. We do those things. So if you are in a place where you need support, please reach out. There are so many options, and there's so many free services. I will help you. You can put my number in here. You can put my email in this, Carl. If somebody needs help and needs the support, happy to help them.
That's fantastic. And fantastic. And I was just thinking, yeah, you know what? I agree with you. Our words matter. So help may give law enforcement and firefighters there might be a triggering word, but how about backup? If you need some mental health backup or support, those types of things. Look at it from that perspective. I mean, you always need backup in this job. I'd love for you to give those numbers again, because not only are we on YouTube, but we're also on Spotify. So And I will be listing all these numbers, not only in the show notes, but we'll make sure that they are available. Give those numbers again, the crisis hotline. And then you say there's a number specifically for law enforcement. If you have that, we'd love to give those numbers as well, just for people who might be listening.
If you haven't seen this is an app. It's called the Safe UT app. You can download it right to your phone. This is a frontline for first responders only. And you can download the QR code. It will load it right to your phone. This is a great resource. Like I said, I've tested it. I've used it.
To reach the Blomquist Blomquist Health Center where you work, the number there is what?
It's 801-262-9619.
Fantastic.
And then you obviously know the 988 number that connects.
Absolutely. 988, the emergency crisis number. You can call that. You can text that number. It goes through, and you can get some support there. Absolutely. Oh, well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And specifically, the Safe UT app is for those who are within the state of Utah. Those who are outside of Utah, there are other resources, but I would say it's safe to assume that even any law enforcement or firefighter who's in crisis, the 988 number obviously works, and then they could obviously email you, and I'm sure that you could send them in a good direction, one way or the other. We just want to make sure that people are not alone, that people have assistance. So, Josh, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Your story is unique. Your background is unique. And brother, you're making a difference. You're making a difference for the community, for the first responder community, and for on behalf of the first responder community. I just thank you. I thank you for having the courage to seek help so many years ago, and then to take that passion and help other firefighters, law enforcement officers, and other people in crisis. God bless you, brother. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I love talking about mental health. You know, it's such a good thing. So anytime. It's good to see you. Good to see your face again, too.
You too, man.